Unaware my husband didn't know I owned the 20-millimeter mansion, he abandoned me outside Shivering, then threw a large party inside for his wealthy boss. What happened next ruined him. He didn't just disrespect his wife. He banned her from walking into her own front door. On a cold night, Emily Carter stood shivering at the iron gates of her family's 20-millimeter mansion, arms wrapped around herself as the wind bit through her dress. Behind her, expensive cars lined the driveway. Security hired by her husband for a very exclusive business event stood between her and the place she grew up in. Men who had no idea the woman they were blocking actually owned the entire estate. Inside, music pounded, laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and her husband, Daniel Reed, raised a drink and called it his mansion. He had told the guards earlier, loud enough for them to remember, "Don't let her in. She doesn't belong here tonight." He said it confident, careless, as if his own wife was an outsider, as if the house, the land, the legacy around them were proof of his status, not hers. What Daniel didn't know was this. The woman he left shivering outside owned every brick of that house. The land, the walls, the rooms he was bragging about to his wealthy boss, all of it was in her name, protected by a trust she'd controlled since she was 21. Emily wasn't standing outside because she was powerless. She was standing outside because she had finally seen who he really was. This is not just a story about a party in a mansion. It's about what happens when a man builds his pride on lies. And the woman he underestimated decides she's done being silent. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Emily's voice be pushed back outside those gates again. When you subscribe, you stand with every person who was cast aside in a place they helped build. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Emily Carter, 32 years old, calm-eyed, soft-spoken, unassuming to anyone who passed her on the street, slammed a thick folder shut with such force that every pen on her desk rattled. For someone known for her quiet nature, the sudden movement felt like thunder breaking a silent sky. Her breath came out uneven, as if she were fighting to hold down emotions nobody else ever saw. She was alone in her home office, the room where her real world existed, far away from what her husband, Daniel Reed, believed. The walls were lined with shelves filled with financial ledgers, investment binders, and property files. Sunlight washed across the room, revealing the truth of who Emily really was, the last heir to the Carter real estate empire, a business built by her late parents long before she was born. To most people, she was still Emily Carter, not Emily Reed. She had kept her maiden name for professional reasons, something Daniel always brushed off as a rich people quirk, and never bothered to examine more deeply. The folder in front of her held the latest reports from Attorney Sanders, legal confirmations, updated title verifications, and a quiet audit she had asked him to run after Daniel's behavior began to shift. It contained line after line of proof that everything her parents had left her was still secure, still in her name, still protected. She had grown up around boardroom tables instead of playgrounds. At 8, she learned how property deeds worked. At 10, she accompanied her mother to meetings where men twice her mother's age bent their voices politely, knowing the Carter family controlled hundreds of millions in assets. When Emily turned 18, both parents died in an unexpected tragedy, leaving her with everything: estates, land, commercial buildings, and the mansion she lived in now. A mansion worth $20 million listed under her maiden name as part of a protected trust her mother created. Her mother's voice often echoed in her mind, soft yet firm. Power stays safest when people don't know you have it. It became the core of who Emily was. It shaped every decision she made. It shaped the secrecy she kept, even from Daniel. Daniel, the man she married 3 years ago. He was 34, charming when he wanted to be, driven and always hungry for approval. He worked in corporate marketing and believed his rising salary helped justify the life they were living. In his mind, Emily's wealthy parents had once given them a generous family arrangement on the mansion, some kind of long-term loan or favor that allowed them to stay there. He never asked deeper questions, not because he trusted her, but because he enjoyed believing he was responsible for the lifestyle they enjoyed. Emily let him believe it. Her mother had warned her about people like Daniel long ago, people who idolize power more than love. But Emily, lonely and hopeful at 29, ignored those warnings when he appeared to offer kindness, attention, and devotion. Now, sitting in her office surrounded by the empire only she controlled, that hope felt fragile. Her phone vibrated. "Good morning, Ms. Carter." The voice belonged to Karen Lewis, her assistant of 7 years, a woman in her 40s, sharp, loyal, and perhaps the only person in Emily's life who fully understood the extent of her wealth and burdens. "I've emailed the updated reports from Sanders. Title confirmations, fund protections, everything you requested. Would you like me to schedule walkthroughs for the new properties?" Emily rubbed her temples, softening her tone. "Not yet, Karen. I'm still thinking." There was a pause, long enough for emotions to breathe through the silence. Emily's gaze drifted to the locked drawer beside her. She reached for the small silver key resting in her palm. Her hand trembled not from fear, but from the weight of everything she kept hidden. She unlocked the drawer slowly, the click echoing like a secret being exposed. Inside were neatly stacked documents, property deeds, trust papers, investment accounts. At the top sat the mansion's title, her mansion, her parents' last gift, the symbol of everything she never told Daniel. She stared at it for a long time. Karen spoke again, voice cautious. "Does Daniel still think everything came from his job and that family favor from your parents?" Emily swallowed, her heartbeat tightening. "Yes," she whispered. "He still thinks that. Let it stay that way on for now." The unspoken meaning hung heavy between them. For now, not forever. Karen's voice lowered. "Emily, forgive me for asking, but are you sure he's never guessed anything more about the scale of it all?" Emily froze. Her fingers hovered above the mansion's title, almost touching it, almost revealing everything she worked so hard to keep hidden. Her breath paused in her chest. Her eyes flicked toward the office door, as if expecting someone, Daniel especially, to walk in and shatter the fragile balance. She didn't answer. She couldn't. And that hesitation, barely a second long, was enough to make even her question the truth. Because lately, Daniel had been different, hungrier, colder, distracted by someone or something she hadn't yet identified. Emily closed the drawer sharply, locking it with a decisive twist of the key. But just before she hung up the call, Karen added one last line, soft, eerie, and almost prophetic. "Emily, be careful. Men who crave power eventually show their true faces." Emily went perfectly still. Daniel Reed, 34 years old, sharp jaw, restless eyes, a man who used confidence like armor, stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest room and barked at his own reflection. No, say it with more certainty," he muttered. "Mr. Turner, I've handled larger accounts before. I can lead the expansion project easily." His fingers tightened around the edge of the dresser. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with desperation. This morning he wasn't practicing for work. He was practicing for survival. To Daniel, Mr. Turner wasn't just his boss. He was a doorway to a world Daniel had spent his entire life staring into, but never stepping inside. Mr. Turner, a polished man in his 50s with quiet confidence and serious wealth, had once told Daniel during a company dinner, "You have potential. With the right push, you could join my inner circle." That single sentence had changed Daniel. Before that, he genuinely loved Emily, her warmth, her steady presence, her gentle ways. He loved coming home to her cooking, her listening ear, her patient questions about his day. But after Turner's compliment, Daniel began seeing life through a harsher lens. The world suddenly felt like a ladder, and every conversation, every gesture, every outfit was a rung he needed to climb. And Emily didn't fit into the world he wanted to reach. He couldn't understand her calmness, her quiet routines, her refusal to show off. He noticed she didn't chase status, didn't care about impressing anyone, didn't join him in conversations about luxury cars or elite social circles. To Daniel, it looked like a lack of ambition. What he didn't know was that her quietness came from a life spent managing an empire, But Daniel was blind to quiet power. He only recognized noise. He repeated the line again. I'm ready for leadership. But the words sounded hollow. He loosened his tie in frustration, pacing the room like a man trying to outrun the truth pressing on his chest. A flashback slammed into him. Emily, 2 years earlier, sitting with him on the couch, holding his hand gently after he came home exhausted from work. She whispered, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're enough." His reply had been sharper than he intended. People with power get respect. I'm tired of being small. That was the first time Emily looked at him with worry instead of admiration. The second shift came months later, when Daniel learned how wealthy Turner was. Real wealth. Not just a good salary. Daniel had been intoxicated by that discovery. He started dressing differently, talking differently, thinking differently. He began watching online videos about gaining influence fast, appealing to the elite, and even dating up, though he never admitted how far he went down that road. Now, standing in the mirror, Daniel touched the polished cufflinks Emily bought him as a gift. He used to value her thoughtfulness, but lately he found himself growing annoyed by it. Annoyed that she didn't push him harder, annoyed that she didn't try to climb with him. He didn't see her softness as strength. He saw it as weakness. Why can't she be more like Turner's Circle? He muttered. Daniel walked to the window and stared out at the grounds of the mansion. The massive, elegant home he genuinely believed they occupied because of a long-term family deal Emily's parents once gave them. In his mind, they were lucky guests of her family's generosity. One day, though, he would have a place that was unquestionably his. He placed his hand on the glass, imagining himself explaining a future home to Turner's wealthy friends. One day I'll have a place like this, he whispered, one that actually belongs to me. He said it with such certainty that he didn't realize the bitter irony in his words. Downstairs, Emily walked quietly toward the kitchen, weariness in her eyes from the secrets she had to carry alone. She passed under the window Daniel stood behind. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. She could feel how far away he was becoming. Daniel stepped back from the window, inhaling sharply, forcing his confidence into place again. He reached for his phone to check the time. Buzz. A message lit the screen. A name appeared. C. Daniel's lips curved into a slow, satisfied smirk. He flipped the phone quickly, hiding the screen from the empty room, as if even walls could betray him. What he didn't know was that this tiny message would become the beginning of everything falling apart. And upstairs, Emily felt a faint chill run across her skin, as though something in the air had shifted. Daniel slammed the bedroom door behind him the moment he returned from work, breathing hard like someone racing time. He snatched his phone from his pocket and pressed the screen with shaking fingers. His eyes darted to the hallway, as if terrified Emily might appear, before clicking on a video call. The screen lit up with the face of a woman who held confidence like fire. This was Claire Holloway, 30 years old, stunning in a calculated way. Straight dark hair, sharp chin, eyes trained to look directly into a person, as if measuring their value. Claire had started out as a professional contact, an event coordinator and social strategist working in Mr. Turner's outer circle. But lines that began as networking had blurred long ago. There were late-night calls, private meetings, and one too many moments where hands lingered longer than they should. Claire was now both things at once, Daniel's unofficial mistress and his opportunity. She had the connections Daniel craved, and she knew it. Finally, Claire snapped, "You took long enough. I was starting to think you got scared again." Daniel straightened his shirt, forcing a lazy smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Relax. I told you, I'm handling everything. Turner trusts me." Claire rolled her eyes. "Turner doesn't trust anyone. He observes people. And right now, he's observing whether you belong with the elite or not." Daniel swallowed hard. Her words stabbed straight into his deepest insecurity. Claire leaned forward aggressively. "I need you to prove you're serious, Daniel. No more hesitating. No more stupid mistakes. If you want a seat at Turner's table, you have to show you're ready." Daniel hated how her voice made him feel. Small, but he hated even more how much he needed her approval to feel big. He moved to the window, lowering his voice. "I told you, I'm handling it. I've already arranged everything for when Turner visits." Claire smirked. "Good. Because powerful circles require powerful companions, not timid wives. Daniel froze. He knew exactly who she meant. Claire didn't let the silence settle. Emily can't be there. She doesn't fit. She'll ruin everything. She won't, Daniel said quickly, too quickly. She doesn't even know about the meeting schedule yet. I'll manage her. And the house? Claire's tone sharpened. You told me it looks expensive. Don't embarrass me by hosting him in some cheap rental. Daniel forced confidence into his voice. He lied so easily it didn't even sting anymore. It belongs to a wealthy partner I'm impressing, he said smoothly. He lets me use it when needed. Trust me, Claire. Stick with me. It'll all pay off. He didn't say that the partner was actually his wife, whose true position he never bothered to understand. A slow smile curved across Claire's mouth. A smile that said she believed him, or maybe she simply didn't care whether it was true. Claire and Daniel had met a year earlier at a corporate event. She noticed him watching Turner speak, his eyes hungry for recognition. She approached him like a recruiter approaches talent, directly, strategically, with the perfect mix of interest and manipulation. She didn't want Daniel as he was. She wanted what Daniel might become. Daniel didn't want Claire for love. He wanted the world she opened doors to. They were two users using each other, each pretending the other had something the other needed: status, access, validation. Claire twisted a strand of her hair and said, "So here's what you need to do. Host Turner this weekend. Make it big. Make it polished. Show him you belong." Then her voice dropped to a whisper sharp as a knife. "And Emily? Keep her completely out of it. No appearances, no accidents. She doesn't look like someone who should be surrounded by real power." Daniel didn't defend his wife. He didn't even hesitate. "I'll handle her," he said quietly. Claire's gaze narrowed with satisfaction. "You better." Just then, a soft knock echoed from outside the room. Daniel's heart jumped into his throat. Emily's voice floated toward the door, gentle, unaware, unthreatening. "Daniel? Are you in there? I need to talk to you for a minute." Panic flashed across Daniel's face. He fumbled with his phone, his voice suddenly sharp. "End the call," he hissed. Claire raised a brow. "She's there? Already? Good. Practice keeping her out." Daniel hung up so fast the screen glitched. Emily pushed open the door slowly, her eyes soft, her expression tired from the day. Daniel turned to her with a rehearsed smile that didn't cover the fear in his eyes. And beneath that moment, beneath Emily's innocent question in Daniel's counterfeit calm, a shadow formed. Emily would begin to sense something she could no longer ignore. The moment Emily stepped into the bedroom, she saw Daniel flinch, an instinctive, sharp movement, like a man caught doing something he shouldn't. His phone slipped slightly in his hand before he tightened his grip around it, knuckles whitening. Emily sensed the tension immediately. She didn't need words. The air itself felt like glass ready to crack. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice gentle but firm, "is everything okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the dresser with stiff shoulders, as if putting distance between them would hide whatever lived behind his eyes. He straightened his shirt, cleared his throat, and forced a casual tone that didn't match the tightness in his jaw. "Everything's fine," he said. But it wasn't fine. Emily felt it, not in the words, but in the spaces between them. She stepped closer, studying him carefully. "You seem tense. Did something happen at work? Is it about Mr. Turner?" Daniel's back stiffened at the name, because lately everything was about Mr. Turner. His reaction wasn't subtle, it was immediate. Emily watched his shoulders rise, watched his breath shorten slightly, watched his eyes shift away from her. And something inside her, the part of her that had been patient, trusting, forgiving, felt a tremor. Not fear, not anger. Just uneasiness. Daniel finally turned toward her with a forced smile. "Just tired, Emily. It's nothing." She nodded slowly, but her heart didn't accept it. Her mind drifted, uninvited, into a flashback. Their wedding day. Daniel standing in front of her, holding her hand so gently that her fingers tingled. He had looked at her with sincerity, with warmth, with a kind of love that felt steady. His vow had been simple, heartfelt. "I choose you." Always you. Emily blinked. The memory dissolved. The man standing in front of her now wasn't the man who made that promise. He looked distracted, distant, swallowed by pressures she didn't yet understand. She reached for her phone, needing grounding, needing something familiar. As she unlocked it, a message appeared at the top of the screen. From Attorney Sanders, title verification complete. Everything is secure. No unauthorized changes detected. Emily exhaled slowly. A wave of relief washed through her. Her parents' trust, her mother's legacy, the safety net she needed, all protected. She had asked Sanders to run the check quietly after noticing Daniel's spending and his growing obsession with status. Now she had confirmation that, legally at least, she was still safe. She lifted her phone slightly, reading the message again. Daniel glanced over. The change in his expression was instant. His eyes narrowed with suspicion, curiosity, and something darker. He couldn't read the full message from that distance, only see the law firm's name on the notification banner. But as quickly as the reaction appeared, he masked it. "Who is that?" he asked, too quick, too sharp. Emily turned her phone slightly away, a small motion, not born from guilt, but from wisdom. Her mother had drilled into her the importance of protection. Never reveal everything, even to those who love you, especially to those who may change. "It's just a message," Emily replied calmly, slipping the phone into her pocket. "Nothing urgent." Daniel's jaw twitched. He assumed she was dealing with some routine family paperwork. The truth, her monitoring an empire he still didn't recognize, was beyond what he chose to imagine. Trying to break the tension, Emily reached for his hand, but he pulled away under the guise of adjusting his cufflinks. The rejection stung, small but sharp. "Daniel," she whispered, "something's bothering you. I can feel it." He turned his back to her before she could read his expression. He pretended to sort through paperwork on the dresser, papers he wasn't even looking at. Just then, his phone buzzed loudly in his palm. Daniel froze. Emily noticed. "Who's that?" He pressed the screen so fast his finger trembled. His face tightened, color draining slightly. Emily couldn't see the message, but she could see his reaction. Shock, urgency, guilt. Daniel turned his body away, hiding the phone. "Just work," he muttered. But it wasn't work, it was Claire. Because the message glowing on his screen read, "Party confirmed. Turner and guests are in. Make sure she's not there." And the sender's name appeared clearly. Emily stepped closer, trying to catch his eyes, but he pocketed the phone and walked past her with a curt, "I need to prepare for tomorrow." He didn't look back. Emily stood still in the silent room, heart tightening. Something was wrong, very wrong, and far beyond the door Daniel just walked through. Emily stood in front of the mirror in the walk-in closet of their hotel suite, hands trembling slightly as she fastened a simple silver necklace around her neck. Daniel had insisted they spend the afternoon and early evening away from the mansion, so the event team could work freely. To him, it was just logistics. To her, it had felt like distance. The moment felt heavier than it should have. She didn't know why. She only knew something inside her chest had started beating differently, faster, harder, as if her heart sensed a storm she couldn't see yet. Daniel appeared in the doorway suddenly, startling her. He looked sharp in a pressed dark suit, hair perfectly styled, but his expression was tight. Too tight. He kept checking his watch, tapping his foot, pulling at his sleeve, all signs of a man who feared time itself. "Are you ready?" Emily asked gently, hoping to ease whatever tension clung to him. He barely looked at her. "Yeah," he muttered. "Let's go." No smile, no compliment. No acknowledgement that she looked beautiful. Emily followed him out, trying to ignore the knot forming in her stomach. The moment they stepped into the car, Daniel's agitation grew worse. He kept adjusting the rearview mirror, checking his phone, sighing loudly. The city lights flickered across his face as they drove back toward the mansion, her childhood home, his stage for the night. Emily attempted conversation. "So, who's coming tonight? Anyone I know from your company?" "It's business," Daniel snapped. "Stay sharp. Don't ask too many questions." Emily blinked at the sudden harshness. "I wasn't. Just don't get in the way, okay?" She sank back in her seat, stunned. The words landed like stones. This wasn't Daniel, not the man she married, not the man who once held her face gently and whispered promises. Something had taken root in him, something hungry and cold. Emily looked at him carefully. He wouldn't meet her eyes. The car approached the mansion, her mansion, in a slow roll of glowing headlights across the long driveway. Elegant exterior lights illuminated the tall pillars and wide entrance. Even after moving into a smaller city apartment for convenience during the week, this estate remained her true home, the place reserved for family gatherings and important events. Emily smiled softly. This place always felt like a memory of her parents, of safety, of warm dinners and laughter echoing through the halls. But tonight, something felt wrong. Daniel parked abruptly near the entrance. Before Emily could open her door, he stepped out and circled to her side. She thought he was helping her. Instead, his hand closed around her arm with a grip too forceful. "Emily," he said in a low, urgent voice, "don't come inside." Her eyes widened. "What? Daniel, what do you mean?" He didn't soften. He didn't explain. He didn't care. "You'll embarrass me," he hissed. "Turner's Circle is in there. These are important people. You don't fit." The words stabbed her without mercy. Emily felt her throat tighten. "I'm your wife." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Not tonight." He raised his hand and motioned toward two large men standing near the door. Security he arranged specifically for this night. They were not her usual staff. These were strangers, hired through an external agency, Claire's team recommended. "Please make sure she stays outside," Daniel ordered. Emily's breath caught. Her knees weakened. The humiliation hit like a physical blow. The guards exchanged a quick, uncomfortable glance. They weren't aware of who she really was. All they'd been told was that this event was critical and that the host's +1 wasn't allowed in. Still, they nodded. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel, why are you doing this?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look at her again. He straightened his suit, inhaled deeply, and walked inside. The doors opened to bright lights, warm laughter, music, applause, and the sound of a woman's heels clicking confidently across the floor. Claire, dressed in a shimmering gold gown, glided toward Daniel with a smile meant for cameras and enemies. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, basking in the attention of the guests around them. Emily watched through the glass panels of the door, her heart fracturing in silence. Claire wasn't subtle, the guests weren't confused, and Daniel wasn't ashamed. Emily hugged her arms around herself as the cold night air wrapped around her thin dress. Suddenly, a memory rose from deep within her. A younger Emily, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the front steps of her childhood home. This home, hugging her knees while her parents argued inside. The air had been cold then too. She remembered whispering into the darkness, "I don't ever want to feel small again." Back then, she had promised herself she would grow strong. She would never let someone push her out of her own life. Yet here she was, standing outside a mansion she owned, barred from entering by the man who swore to protect her. Pain tightened, then sharpened, then transformed into something else, clarity. Emily reached into her purse. Her fingers touched her phone. She unlocked it with steady hands, no shaking now, and brought it to her ear. Her voice was calm, almost frighteningly calm. "It's time," she whispered. "Proceed." She ended the call before the person on the other side could reply. The person already knew what proceed meant. They had prepared for this possibility ever since Emily first asked them to. And behind her, through the thick walls of the mansion, she heard something shift, an energy gathering, a storm beginning. Emily stood frozen just beyond the main doors of the glowing mansion, the mansion she owned, while laughter burst from inside like fireworks exploding against her ears. The cold air cut into her skin. Her dress, beautiful but thin, did nothing to protect her from the bitterness surrounding her. The two hired security officers, men Daniel had contracted through an external company recommended by Claire, stood stiffly a few feet away. Their shoulders were broad, their expressions professional, but their eyes told the truth. They wouldn't look at her. They were ashamed. Her breath shook, not from the cold, but from the sheer force of humiliation crushing her chest. This was her home, her parents' legacy, her sanctuary, and she was locked out like a stranger. She wrapped her arms around herself tightly, as if holding her own heart together. The sound of clinking glasses, loud conversations, and upbeat music slammed into her over and over through the walls. It felt like a cruel reminder. Daniel had chosen everyone else over her. Just minutes earlier, he'd stood in the doorway, looked her in the eye, and said she would embarrass him. Emily swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay upright. Her heels dug into the gravel of the driveway, grounding her in the only way they could. Just beyond the doors, Daniel's voice rose above the guests. "Welcome, everyone. Make yourselves at home in my mansion." Emily's eyes widened. My mansion? She took a shaky step back, staring up at the tall windows. Through them, she saw shadows moving inside, figures raising champagne glasses, heads thrown back in laughter, people admiring art pieces she chose, hallways she decorated, memories her family built, her home, her name on the deed, her mother's final gift, and Daniel claimed it like a trophy he earned. Through one wide window, she saw him standing in the center of the room, arm around Claire. Claire, the woman from his calls, now standing too close, smiling too brightly. Emily watched as Daniel bragged loudly, gesturing toward the grand staircase and the antique mirrors she restored with Mr. Whitlock's help. "Turner," Daniel announced proudly to his wealthy boss, "this house is proof I'm ready for the next step. I understand how people in your world live." Turner nodded with a polite smile, unaware of the lie. Claire giggled beside Daniel, clearly enjoying the performance, soaking in borrowed importance. Emily felt something inside her crack, then crumble, then explode. Heartbreak was no longer the strongest emotion. Anger awakened, quiet, controlled, and rising like fire. She stepped away from the door, breathing unevenly. And suddenly a flashback surged into her mind. She was 21 again, sitting across from her mother in a private office in this very mansion. Papers were spread across the desk. Her mother, elegant and wise, held a pen in one hand and Emily's hand in the other. "Emily," her mother said softly, "this mansion is yours now." Emily had shaken her head. "But I'm still young. I don't know enough." Her mother smiled gently. "You will. I've set everything up with Sanders. The trust is ironclad. And when the day comes, you'll know when to stand up for yourself. Use this wisely, not for pride, but for strength." Emily blinked, returning to the freezing present. Her mother's words rang in her ears like a bell demanding to be heard. You'll know when to stand up for yourself. And right now, standing on her own property while being barred from entering by a husband who lied about owning it, she knew. The cold no longer felt like cold. It felt like fuel. Her phone buzzed faintly in her purse. With calm hands, she pulled it out. A notification glowed at the top. A follow-up message from Attorney Sanders, time-stamped earlier that evening. "Everything you asked to prepare is ready. Call whenever you decide." They had discussed this in theory days ago. After she noticed changes in Daniel's behavior, she asked Sanders to quietly assemble every document she might need if things ever crossed a line. Title deeds, financial reports, access logs, copies of contracts. It had been a contingency. Tonight, Daniel had crossed the line. Emily scrolled quickly and tapped Sanders' contact. The phone rang once, twice. Then his voice answered, steady and familiar. "Emily." She stared at the front door of her home, at the silhouettes inside who thought they were safe. Her voice came out calm, almost frighteningly calm. "It's time," she said. "Proceed." No extra words. He already knew what proceed meant. She ended the call before he could reply. Moments later, another message buzzed in from Sanders. "On my way to the office now. I'll alert Whitlock and Rowan. We'll be ready tonight." Emily's heartbeat steadied. They weren't just going to react. They were going to respond, with evidence, with clarity, with the law on her side. Behind her, the two hired guards shifted awkwardly, still under Daniel's instructions, but clearly uncomfortable keeping a woman out in the cold. "Ma'am," one of them said quietly, I'm sorry. We were told—" "It's all right," Emily interrupted gently. "You didn't know. They were following orders. The wrong orders, but not theirs." Her pain cooled. Her fire sharpened. and her decision hardened into steel. She took a slow breath, lifted her chin, and turned away from the mansion, not defeated, but transformed. Her steps down the long driveway were calm, controlled, almost frightening in their serenity. She didn't look back. As she moved toward the waiting ride Sanders had prearranged, just in case, she glanced once more at the glowing windows. Emily wasn't leaving to cry. She was leaving to prepare. Everyone who wronged her would begin to learn exactly what proceed meant. Less than an hour after walking away from her own front door, Emily pushed open the glass door to a private conference room in Sanders' downtown office with a force that surprised even her. The city outside glowed with late-night lights, but inside the room everything was bright, cold, and sharp. Nothing like the warm glow of the party she had just left behind. One world was mocking her existence, the other was about to restore it. 3 people stood when she entered. Attorney Harold Sanders, late 50s, calm eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses, the man who managed her family's legal affairs since her childhood. Mr. Whitlock, her longtime property manager, gray-haired, loyal, respected, a man who watched her grow up and treated her as family. Chief Rowan, the original head of mansion security, broad-shouldered, quiet, fiercely protective, recently replaced only because Daniel wanted a more modern look and pressured Emily to let him bring in his own people for events. All 3 watched Emily closely, not with pity, with respect. Attorney Sanders stepped forward first. "Emily, are you ready?" Her voice came out steady, but her fingers curled slightly into fists. "I am." That answer settled the room. Documents were already spread across the long table. Organized, stamped, labeled. They weren't just papers. They were pieces of truth, weapons of clarity. Sanders adjusted his glasses and began laying out the first set of documents. "This," he said, tapping a thick folder, "is the certified copy of the title deed. The house is legally and solely yours. No joint ownership, no shared claims. Daniel has no rights, no matter how many times he calls it his." Emily inhaled deeply, absorbing each word. She already knew this, but hearing it tonight, after what he had done, struck differently. Next, the lawyer slid a tablet toward her and pressed play. Grainy footage appeared, security camera feeds from earlier that night. Chief Rowan's voice rumbled with quiet anger. "I still have full access to the system. When Daniel insisted on hiring outside security for tonight, I kept an eye on the feeds. I started recording the moment I saw you kept outside." The footage showed Daniel waving her off near the front entrance. Daniel telling security to keep her out. Emily shivering in the cold as the party erupted behind closed doors. Daniel ushering Claire inside as if she were the rightful hostess. Emily watched herself on the screen, small and silent against the darkness. Chief Rowan clenched his jaw. "Those men he hired aren't part of your staff. They weren't briefed about the house ownership. If they knew, they never would have stepped between you and your own property. I made sure my regular team knew your status from day one." Mr. Whitlock nodded. "They were following the wrong orders." He hesitated, clearly emotional. "I've wanted to say this for a long time, Emily. I never trusted Daniel. I saw signs. He spoke carelessly about the mansion, as if it were his. But I waited for you to see it for yourself. I didn't want to push you." Emily's throat tightened. The loyalty in the room felt like a shield wrapping around her heart. Sanders placed the next set of documents on the table. "Here are the financial reports you requested last week when you first grew concerned. Daniel made several transactions in the past month, using cards linked to accounts he assumed were joint." He tapped the papers. "They were not joint. They were yours. The trust allowed limited spousal access for daily life. But he exceeded that, moved funds into appearance purchases and hotel stays without asking." Emily's jaw clenched. Her generosity had been twisted into entitlement. "Anything else?" she asked, voice low. The lawyer handed her a final sealed envelope. "Everything is ready for the morning. Your instructions, your evidence, your rights." He looked at her steadily. "If Turner is still there, and based on the schedule and the catering arrangements, he likely is, you walk through your own door, and the truth will walk in with you." Emily sank into a chair, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything rising inside her. Her mind drifted to her mother again. Use this wisely, not for pride, but for strength. Her mother had never meant wealth alone. She meant dignity, courage, the ability to say, enough. Tonight, Emily finally understood. She closed her eyes briefly, letting a wave of clarity wash over her. Every betrayal, every lie, every cold moment at the mansion door sharpened her resolve. She opened her eyes again, and they weren't soft anymore. They were steel. Mr. Whitlock quietly set up a small recording device, a digital log that Emily had asked for days earlier when she first sensed something was wrong. It wasn't meant for the public. It was for herself, for clarity, for closure. Emily stood, walked to the center of the room and faced the camera. Her shoulders were straight, her chin lifted, her voice steady. He took my kindness for weakness, she said slowly. He forgot who I was. The air in the room stilled. Sanders watched her with quiet pride. Mr. Whitlock wiped his eye discreetly. Chief Rowan rested a hand on his belt, protective instinct rising. Emily turned off the camera. Then she whispered almost to herself, "Tomorrow, everything changes." A subtle shift passed over her expression, something calm, dangerous, certain, and no one inside that mansion was prepared for what was coming. The mansion was strangely quiet after the chaos of the night before. The kind of silence that comes after loud music, spilled secrets, and too much alcohol. The sun peeked through the curtains with cold brightness, revealing bodies slumped across couches. Guests who partied too long and stayed in guest rooms Daniel insisted they use. Empty glasses, half-eaten food, music equipment left on standby. Lights still glowing faintly. In the grand room, sitting elegantly on one of the couches, was Mr. Turner, Daniel's wealthy boss. Early 60s, composed, sharp-minded, the type of man who judged a person more by integrity than charm. He sipped his morning coffee slowly, scanning the mansion with a furrowed brow. This wasn't the environment he expected for a business weekend. Daniel had promised strategy sessions, not a late-night circus. Turner had been too tired to drive back to his hotel the previous night. Daniel had pushed him to stay, rattling on about using the mansion fully. Turner reluctantly agreed. That decision would change everything. Daniel stumbled into the room a moment later, still wearing last night's wrinkled suit jacket. His eyes were bright with forced energy. He was performing again, desperate to impress Turner despite the fatigue. "Good morning, sir," Daniel said loudly. "Hope you slept well. I had the staff prepare breakfast. And I can show you more of my property development plans if..." Turner held up a hand. "Daniel, please, it's too early for another pitch." Daniel laughed awkwardly, waving his hand. Of course. I just want you to see what I'm capable of. This mansion is only the beginning. Once we finalize the expansion project, I can move to acquiring something bigger." He said it proudly, confidently, loud enough for the drifting guests to hear. And then, the front doors opened, not gently, not quietly, with purpose. Heads lifted. Turner straightened. Daniel froze. Emily walked in. She wore a simple, clean outfit, not glamorous, not dramatic, yet her presence cut through the room sharper than any spotlight. Her face was calm, posture straight, eyes steady, and she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Attorney Sanders, carrying 2 large folders and a tablet. His presence alone radiated seriousness. Behind them followed the original mansion staff, including Chief Rowan and several longtime employees, people who knew Emily since childhood, people who respected her deeply. Emily didn't rush, didn't tremble. She simply walked toward the center of the room with a dignity that made even the half-awake guests sit up. Daniel's face drained of color. Emily, I thought you went home last night. I was going to call..." She didn't look at him. She looked at Turner. "Good morning, Mr. Turner," she said evenly. "I apologize for the confusion. I needed to speak with you directly." Turner blinked, visibly taken aback. "Emily, I didn't know you were here last night." "I wasn't," she replied calmly. "I was outside." Turner frowned. "Outside? Why?" Daniel stepped forward quickly, hands raised as if trying to block the truth. "Sir, she's upset. She's making things sound complicated. Everything is handled. This mansion is..." Emily opened a folder and handed Turner the first document. "The title deed," she said softly. "The mansion you stayed in last night belongs only to me. Under my family's estate, my husband has no ownership, no claim, and no right to present it as his." Turner's expression hardened. He read the papers slowly, noting the Carter family trust, the dates, the signatures. Then he lifted his eyes toward Daniel with sharp judgment. Daniel swallowed. Emily handed Turner a second set of documents. "These are financial records," she continued, "showing funds my husband spent without understanding whose account he was accessing. Luxury purchases, hotel stays, and event costs in preparation for impressing you. He used cards tied to my trust, assuming they were joint. They were not." Turner's face darkened further. Daniel tried to speak. "Sir, I can explain. It was just—" Emily handed Turner a tablet, security footage from the night before, already cued to the most important moments. On the screen, Daniel instructing the hired guards to keep her out. Daniel ignoring her shivering in the cold. Daniel calling the mansion his. Daniel kissing Claire on the cheek, his hand lingering at her waist as if she were his partner. Gasps rose around the room as Turner watched it. Daniel's eyes widened in panic. "This is taken out of context," Emily's voice cut through him. "And finally," she said, passing Turner one last folder, "evidence of Daniel's affair. Messages, hotel invoices, and meeting logs. I didn't come here to embarrass you, Mr. Turner. I came so you wouldn't be misled by a man building his pitch on a lie." Turner closed the folder slowly. The room stayed silent. Emily held his gaze, her voice calm, steady, unshaking. "Last night, I stood outside my own home while my husband tried to replace me. I thought you should know the kind of man you were considering for your inner circle." Her words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Turner turned to Daniel. Slowly, deliberately, wrath forming in his eyes. "Daniel," he said, voice low and dangerous, "you're fired, effective immediately. Our firm will not move forward with you on any project, and I will be reviewing every representation you've made in my name." The room erupted in whispers. Daniel staggered back as if struck. "Sir, wait, please. This is just a misunderstanding." But Turner didn't look at him again. Daniel's world, the one he built on lies, greed, and arrogance, crumbled in seconds. As gasps continued and Daniel's voice cracked with desperation, Emily lifted her chin and turned slightly toward the door. She wouldn't be the only one delivering consequences. The law would speak next. Weeks later, in a quiet courtroom far removed from the mansion's chandeliers, a heavy wooden stamp slammed onto a stack of legal documents, echoing through the room. Thud. The clerk lifted the papers, slid them into an official folder, and handed them to Attorney Sanders. The bright red ink marked the beginning of Daniel Reed's formal downfall, bold and undeniable. Daniel stood beside his own lawyer, shoulders slumped, face drained of color. His suit was neat, but nothing about him looked powerful anymore. He looked like a man suddenly waking up from a long, arrogant dream, only to find the nightmare was real. Emily sat across the room, calm, composed, steady. Behind her sat her allies, Mr. Whitlock, Chief Rowan, and Sanders' assistant. They weren't there to battle. They were there to witness justice. The judge, a stern woman in her late 40s, adjusted her glasses and reviewed the final pages silently. The courtroom was so still it felt like everyone was holding their breath. The judge lifted her head. "We're reconvened on the matter of property protection, misuse of funds, and grounds for dissolution of marriage." Daniel's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client believes there has been a misunderstanding regarding access to certain accounts." "There was no misunderstanding," the judge cut in. "Mrs. Reed, please confirm. You are the sole legal owner of the mansion in question?" Emily stood, hands clasped calmly. "Yes, Your Honor. The property was transferred to me at age 21 as part of my family inheritance. It has always remained in my name, under a trust managed by Attorney Sanders." The judge nodded. "And you have documents proving your husband was informed this was your family estate and not an asset he owned?" Emily didn't flinch. "Yes, emails and messages where he refers to it as your parents' place and your inheritance. He never once referred to it as joint property, until he presented it that way to his boss. Sanders stepped forward, placing copies of the deed, financial records, and security footage on the evidence table. The screen at the side of the courtroom lit up again. Daniel instructing security to keep Emily out. Daniel bragging about his mansion in front of Turner. Daniel dismissing Emily in the cold. Daniel kissing Claire at the party. People in the courtroom murmured quietly. Daniel lowered his head in shame. Then came Claire. Claire stepped forward reluctantly, wearing a conservative outfit instead of her usual glamour. She clasped her hands tightly, avoiding Daniel's gaze. Her voice was tight when she spoke. I didn't know the house was hers. Daniel told me it belonged to him. He said he was about to move up in Turner's firm and wanted to show that he could live at that level. Daniel's head snapped up. Claire, don't do this. But she continued, her tone growing more defensive, trying to protect herself. He told me Emily wasn't supportive, that she was holding him back socially. He asked me to help him upgrade his life, convince Turner he belonged in the top circle. I agreed to assist with the event. I didn't know he was misusing funds or lying about ownership. She glanced at Emily briefly, guilt flickering in her eyes. I shouldn't have been involved. I'm sorry. She said the last words directly to Emily. Emily's expression didn't change. She didn't need revenge through anger. Truth was enough. Claire stepped down quickly, eyes avoiding Daniel's. It was over for him, professionally, socially, and now legally. The judge straightened her papers. Mrs. Reed, she said, the court confirms full protection of your assets. All accounts, properties, and inherited holdings remain yours alone. Your husband has no legal claim to the mansion or to funds tied to your family trust. Daniel seemed to fold into himself. The judge continued. As for grounds for divorce, the evidence is clear. Abandonment, misuse of accessible funds, misrepresentation of assets, and marital misconduct through infidelity are all established. The court grants your petition for dissolution of marriage, effective immediately, with no spousal support awarded to Mr. Reed, given his conduct in your separate estate. She paused, giving the words time to sink deep. This court further orders that Mr. Reed repay specific misused amounts where possible, as outlined in the financial report. Any remaining dispute over minor items will be handled in a separate civil process if needed. The gavel hit the desk. Daniel flinched. Emily didn't. When the courtroom began to empty, Daniel rushed toward Emily, panic flooding his face. Emily, please wait. She didn't move. She simply looked at him, calm and unreadable. Daniel's voice broke. I can change. I swear. I was stressed. I made mistakes. Don't leave me with nothing. Don't do this. Emily's expression softened, not with sympathy, but with clarity. I'm not doing anything to you, she said softly. I'm just refusing to keep paying for who you chose to become. Daniel shook his head desperately. Emily, please, just give me one more chance. But before he could finish, Claire walked past them slowly. Her steps were hesitant but deliberate. She leaned close to Daniel's ear and whispered, I can't be with someone who has nothing to offer, not even honesty. Daniel's breath hitched, like the final blow had landed. Claire walked away without looking back. Daniel turned to Emily again, eyes pleading, but she stepped aside, leaving him alone in the hallway. His world collapsed around him. Attorney Sanders approached Emily quietly. It's done, he said. Legally, you're protected, and you're free. Emily exhaled, a slow, steady breath, but her eyes were not on Daniel. They were on the mansion keys resting in her palm. There was still one final step, one final return, one final closure. She would walk back into her home, not as a wife abandoned, but as a woman restored. Unaware she just closed a $100 billion deal, her husband abandoned her pregnant with triplets to marry his lover. What she did next will shock you. He didn't just walk out. He erased her in one night. On the same day, Grace Turner unknowingly secured a $100 billion corporate deal that would change her destiny. Her husband Daniel packed his bags, left her 7 months pregnant with triplets, and drove away straight into the arms of his mistress, Lila, her own co-worker. Grace, you deserve someone better, he said coldly, placing his wedding ring on the table. I can't do this anymore. Those words tore through her like glass. While her world collapsed around her, Daniel's rose glittering with cameras, headlines, and a new wife by his side. He thought she would disappear quietly. He thought she was just a broken wife with 3 unborn children and no fight left in her. But what he didn't know was that the woman he left behind had just signed away a fortune that would soon make her one of the most powerful shareholders in the empire he wanted to control. This is not just a story of betrayal, it's a story of awakening, of a woman who turned silence into strategy, of a mother who transformed pain into power, of karma delivered not through rage but through calm, calculated justice. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't screamed in anger, it's whispered in success. And when silence speaks louder than pride, every betrayer must finally listen. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting her courage go unheard. But when you click that button, you stand with every woman who was left behind, every promise broken, and every heart that refused to stay silent. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because this story, this rise from ruin, belongs to all of us. The kettle screamed before the morning did. Steam hissed through the small apartment, catching the soft rays of dawn as they slipped through half-drawn curtains. The kitchen smelled of coffee and warm toast, and yet there was a quiet ache beneath the calm, the kind of silence that holds its breath before the world changes. Grace Turner, 32, stood barefoot by the counter, her round belly pressing against her loose cotton dress. 7 months pregnant with triplets and still typing on her laptop with the same focus she once had in her early career days. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, finishing the final part of a report for a global tech startup called Axiom Technologies, where she worked remotely as a financial analyst. She was known in her team as the quiet mind behind big numbers. Grace wasn't aware that this morning, those same numbers had just helped finalize one of the largest business mergers in history, a $100 billion deal between Axiom and its international partner, Zenith Systems. Her email notification blinked. Final confirmation sent congratulations to all contributors. She smiled softly, not realizing the weight of those words. To her, it was simply another project well done. She shut her laptop and exhaled, rubbing her lower back. Her eyes moved toward the closed bedroom door. Inside, her husband, Daniel Turner, was still asleep. Daniel, 35, was handsome, fit, and ambitious, the kind of man who wore confidence like a tailored suit. Once he'd told her he admired her focus and simplicity. Lately, though, his compliments had grown rare, replaced by quiet irritation and late-night absences. Grace turned back to the stove, flipping eggs while her thoughts drifted to their past. 10 years earlier. They were in college then, sharing one notebook, 2 dreams. Grace was the scholarship student who studied until dawn. Daniel, the business major who believed they could conquer the world together. They made promises under the yellow campus lights about houses with gardens, little kids, and late-night takeout when life got busy. He once told her, "You'll be the heart, I'll be the drive," and she believed him. The smell of toast brought her back. Grace plated breakfast eggs, toast, and coffee, just the way he liked, black with 2 sugars. She set it neatly on the table and went to wake him. Inside the room, Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, already dressed in his crisp shirt, scrolling through his phone. His tie lay crumpled beside him. "You're up early," Grace said gently, her voice soft, like the light spilling in. He didn't look up. "Got a meeting? Before 8? She asked, trying to smile. "You barely slept," Daniel sighed. "Grace, not today. I'm late." She stood there for a moment, her hand resting on the doorframe. He brushed past her, grabbed a piece of toast, and kissed her cheek half-heartedly, the kind of kiss that said goodbye but didn't mean it. Grace forced a smile. "I have some good news to tell you tonight," she said quietly. He only murmured, "We'll talk later," before walking out. The door clicked shut. The apartment fell still again. Only the clock ticked loud, steady, almost cruel. Grace stared at the empty table where his coffee grew cold. She sat down, pressing her palm against her belly as the babies shifted inside her. "He's been so distant lately," she whispered to the room. "Maybe it's just stress." Her phone buzzed. An email notification. From Axiom Technologies. Subject: Merger finalized, employee bonus allocations to follow. Grace smiled faintly and clicked open the file. She skimmed the long text, not noticing the number buried near the bottom. 100 billion.0 billion. She closed the laptop, humming to herself. She didn't see that line again, not yet. She reached for her phone and typed a quick message to Daniel. Can't wait to tell you my good news tonight. The message sent instantly. She waited for the familiar typing dots to appear. They didn't. A small frown crossed her face. She brushed it off, telling herself he must be driving. But deep down, something felt off, the kind of silence that doesn't come from distance, but from disconnection. She turned on the small radio, letting soft piano music fill the room. The sunlight warmed her skin, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine the evening him coming home, maybe smiling, maybe even proud of her. But as she stood there, the camera of life quietly zoomed in on the laptop screen she'd left open. The cursor blinked beside the words, merger completion, 100 billion. A name sat under the signatories, Grace E. Turner, listed as primary analyst, project lead. And just above it, in smaller gray text, an unread message flashed in her inbox. From Daniel Turner. Subject, we need to talk. Outside, the morning sunlight dimmed for just a second as clouds moved in. Inside, Grace smiled softly to herself, unaware that her quiet brilliance had already changed her life, and that by tonight, the warmth of her home would turn into silence she would never forget. A gust of wind rattled the window slightly. It sounded almost like a warning, or maybe a whisper of what was coming next. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the apartment like thunder. Plates rattled. A fork clattered to the floor. Grace froze in the middle of the living room, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Daniel stood near the door, his face pale, eyes cold, a suitcase at his feet. The evening light through the window had turned silver gray, heavy with rain. The table she had set for dinner gleamed, untouched steam rising from the plates that would never be eaten. Daniel, her voice trembled. What's going on? He didn't answer at first. He just looked at her, the woman who had built her days around him, who carried not one but three of his children. His eyes shifted past her, almost as if she were a stranger blocking his way. Finally, he said, flat and final, Grace, I can't do this anymore. The words hit like a physical blow. She took a step closer, her bare feet pressing against the cold tile. Can't do what? Daniel, what are you saying? He exhaled sharply, gripping the handle of the suitcase. This, us, the kids, everything. I feel trapped, Grace. Her heart sank. Trapped? She repeated, almost whispering. We wanted this, the house, the babies, the family. You said, that was before, he interrupted, his tone cutting. Before everything got too heavy. I can't breathe in this life anymore. She blinked, confusion flooding her face. Daniel, you're just tired. You said work was rough. He cut her off again, this time with a slight tremor in his voice. It's not about work. It's about us. He hesitated, then added softly, there's someone else. The world went still. The rain outside began to fall harder, hammering against the window. Grace's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes filled, yet her tears refused to fall. Someone else? Daniel's jaw tightened. Her name is Lila. You met her once at the company gala. She makes me feel alive again. Grace took a shaky step backward, gripping the edge of the table for balance. The pain spread through her chest like ice. You're leaving me? For her? He said nothing. Silence was worse than an answer. Her mind reeled. Lila, the glamorous PR executive who had smiled too long at Daniel, laughed too easily at his jokes. Grace had brushed off the unease then, trusting him, trusting love. Now, the truth stood in front of her with a suitcase and no remorse. She stared at him, eyes wide, voice trembling but firm. I'm carrying your children, Daniel. 3 of them. You can't walk out now. He ran a hand through his hair, looking away. I'm sorry. I can't do this. You deserve someone better. I'm not that man. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, his wedding ring. The small circle of gold rolled once before, stopping beside a folded note. Her body stiffened as she watched him pick up the suitcase and open the door. The sound of heels clicked behind him. Grace's gaze lifted, and there, standing in the doorway, dressed in a beige trench coat and holding an umbrella, was Lila Carter, 30, polished, beautiful, and expressionless. "Are you ready?" Lila asked quietly. Her voice was calm, smooth like someone who'd already won. Daniel nodded, avoiding Grace's eyes. "Yeah, let's go." Grace's breath caught. "You brought her here?" Her voice cracked, the disbelief mixing with rage and heartbreak. Daniel paused, but didn't answer. He just stepped out into the hallway. Lila turned once toward Grace. Their eyes met, one woman, broken, the other composed. There was no apology in Lila's stare, only quiet triumph. The door closed, and then silence. Grace's hands trembled as she reached for the ring on the table. The metal was still warm. The note beside it read, "You deserve someone better. I can't do this." She dropped it. Her breath came out uneven. The babies inside her shifted almost as if they felt her pain. She tried to call Daniel, her fingers shaking over the screen. The phone rang once, twice, then cut off. She tried again. This time a cold voice replied, "The number you've dialed is no longer in service." Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The room felt too big now. The dinner plates steamed quietly in the background, their warmth fading fast. Grace slid into the chair at the table, staring blankly at the empty seat across from her. The rain outside had turned into a full storm, wind thrashing against the glass as if the world itself mourned for her. Slowly she reached for her phone again, hoping for anything to ground her. A notification flashed at the top of the screen. Breaking news. Tech company seals record-breaking $100 billion deal. Her mind didn't register it. She was staring through the words, numb. Only the faint irony hung in the air that she had just built a fortune and lost everything that made her want it. She whispered to no one, "You left? Now? When we needed you most?" That night, as the rain drummed against the windows, Grace's mind drifted to the early days of their marriage, the time before everything cracked. Daniel had once been gentle, the kind of man who carried her shoes after long walks and promised her forever. When she miscarried their first child 3 years ago, he had held her in his arms and whispered, "Next time, we'll have a house full of laughter." They moved into this very apartment after that loss, calling it their fresh start. Grace decorated every corner with hope photos from their honeymoon, small notes he left her when they were still in love. But soon after, Daniel began working late, chasing promotions, chasing validation. Grace thought he was building for their future. She didn't realize he was building an exit. Now as she sat alone with his empty chair across from her, the echoes of those old promises felt like ghosts haunting unfinished sentences from a man who no longer existed. And somewhere deep inside, a new kind of silence began to form, not of despair, but of quiet resolve. Outside, thunder rolled like an unanswered cry. Inside, Grace sat alone, surrounded by food that no longer mattered, love that no longer existed, and silence that screamed louder than any argument ever could. Her phone dimmed to black, but the reflection of her face stayed faintly visible, calm on the outside, breaking inside. And in that faint reflection, the next shadow began to stir, a storm far colder than the one outside, waiting quietly for its time to come. The hospital monitor beeped softly, steady but fragile, like her heart trying to remember its rhythm. Grace blinked against the bright white lights, pain still echoing through her body. The air smelled of antiseptic and fresh linen. Her body felt hollow, but her arms were full, 3 tiny babies sleeping beside her in the clear crib. Their faces were peaceful, untouched by the chaos waiting beyond the walls. Then came the knock. A nurse stepped in, cheerful and warm, her voice gentle. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner. You did wonderfully. 3 strong babies, all healthy." Grace nodded weakly. The nurse adjusted the blankets over the newborns, then glanced at her. "Anyone coming to see you today? The father, maybe?" Grace hesitated. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked away, eyes glistening. "No, not today." The nurse smiled kindly, unaware of the knife that question had twisted. "That's all right. You're stronger than you know." Grace managed a faint smile. "Strength doesn't feel like this." The nurse touched her arm, then left quietly, pulling the curtain halfway closed behind her. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that pressed on the chest, reminding you that you were alone. Grace stared at the crib. 3 lives breathing softly. 3 small miracles born into a world that had already taken something from them. Her phone lay on the bedside table. She hadn't touched it in days, afraid of what she might see, afraid of what silence might confirm. But something inside her whispered, "You have to know." With trembling fingers, she reached for it. The screen lit up, hundreds of notifications, missed calls from coworkers, emails from her company congratulating her for the historic success of the Axiom Zenith merger. She scrolled past them, her eyes blurry from exhaustion. Then she froze. A headline blazed across her news feed. CEO Daniel Turner marries PR executive Lila Carter in lavish ceremony. Her breath caught, her chest tightened. She clicked the article. Photos loaded, clear, cruel, glittering. Daniel in a sharp black tuxedo, smiling wide. Lila beside him, glowing in white silk, her hand in his. Around them, a sea of flashing cameras and champagne flutes. Grace stared at the photo as if it were a hallucination. The man in the picture was her husband, the same man who had walked out on her 2 weeks ago, saying he needed time to breathe. But there he was, laughing, alive, free. Her hand shook as she zoomed in on the image. Daniel's wrist glinted the same silver watch she'd given him for their anniversary. A small engraving on the back read, "For the man who never gives up." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, afraid of waking the babies. Her breathing turned shallow, her lips trembling. Another photo, Lila, tossing her bouquet into the air, smiling at the camera. Her caption read, "Some stories are meant to start over." Grace's vision blurred. Start over? Her memory flashed a moment from months ago. The company gala. Daniel introducing Lila with that proud smile. "Grace, this is Lila. She's handling PR for the new deal. Smart as they come." Lila had laughed, her eyes lingering a bit too long on Daniel. "You're lucky, Grace. He's the most dedicated man I've met." At the time, Grace had brushed it off. A harmless coworker, a harmless laugh. Now, she realized those laughs had been building a home behind her back. She placed the phone face down and turned to her babies. They shifted softly, their tiny fingers curling. For a moment, she felt her heart split in two, half for the love she lost, half for the life she now had to protect. The door opened again. The nurse peeked in. "Everything all right?" Grace forced a small nod. "Yes," she whispered. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. It would never be the same again. She turned her gaze to match her gain, the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving streaks on the glass that caught the fading light. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, cold, sharp, untouchable. Grace looked back at her phone one last time. The screen dimmed, but the image of Daniel and Lila stayed burned in her mind, his hand on another woman's waist, his smile brighter than ever. A deep, calm silence filled the room. Her tears dried. Her face hardened, not with anger yet, but with clarity. Unseen beneath the white sheets, her hand curled into a quiet fist. Somewhere deep inside her, something began to shift, not rage, not revenge, but resolve. She leaned back, eyes open, whispering under her breath, "They think they've won. Let them." Outside, a single car horn echoed faintly distant, sharp and fading. Inside, Grace's heartbeat steadied slow, even, purposeful. And just before the monitor's soft beeping faded into the night, her phone lit up one more time, a new message. From her company. "Congratulations, Grace. Your equity activation paperwork has been approved." Her eyes flicked toward it. For the first time since Daniel left, she didn't cry. She just stared quiet, still, unreadable. And in that silence, the seeds of something greater began to grow. Something neither Daniel nor Lila would ever see coming. The rain came back before dawn, hammering the windows as if trying to wake her. Grace startled awake on the couch, the sound mixing with the quiet whimpers of her newborns in their cribs beside her. Empty bottles, folded baby clothes, and unpaid bills filled the small apartment pieces of a life she was still trying to hold together. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused to rest. Every night since the hospital, sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. Each time she closed her eyes, the image returned Daniel in his tuxedo, smiling beside Lila in white. She sat up slowly, pressing a hand against her aching ribs. The clock blinked, 3:47 a.m. The silence was too loud. Then her gaze fell on the corner of the room, her old laptop, half hidden under a pile of unopened mail. The same laptop she'd used the morning before Daniel left. Something inside her stirred, a quiet pull, curiosity mixed with pain. She reached for it, brushed off the dust, and opened it. The screen flickered to life, glowing softly in the dark. Her inbox flooded with unread messages. Dozens from Axiom Technologies, the company she had helped build from the ground up. She clicked one. Subject: merger completion. Congratulations to all contributors. Her heartbeat quickened. She remembered signing the papers, but she had never looked closely. She clicked the attached file. There it was again. A single line buried deep in the contract summary. Total value, $100 billion. Grace stared, barely breathing. She scrolled down. Her name appeared clearly. Grace E. Turner, lead financial analyst, project lead. Her hands began to tremble. Not from fear this time, but from awakening. Slowly she opened another message, an internal memo. It mentioned equity compensation, employee stock options, and shareholder conversion rights. She frowned. None of that had ever been explained to her. Daniel used to handle the finances. He told her not to worry about the boring parts. Now she read every line, every term, every figure, and what she discovered made her eyes widen. Grace had been granted deferred shares worth millions hidden behind corporate jargon, pending her signature of final delivery confirmation. That signature had already been done by her own hand. For the first time in months, she smiled. It wasn't joy. It was understanding. She whispered into the glow of the screen. He thought I was the weak one. He didn't read the fine print either. She printed the documents and began arranging them neatly on the table, page by page, like evidence at a crime scene. The sound of the printer filled the apartment, steady and relentless. As the baby stirred, she glanced at them with soft eyes. Mommy's just working, she said quietly. We're going to be okay. The room, once filled with grief, now pulsed with quiet energy. Grace's mind sharpened. Every click of the mouse felt like recovery. Every highlighted word felt like revenge taking shape. Hours passed unnoticed. The rain softened. The city outside began to wake, but Grace didn't move. Her reflection in the laptop screen looked different now. Not broken, not weak, but calculating. When dawn finally spilled through the curtains, the table was covered with documents. Her name repeated across them in black and white, undeniable. Grace leaned back, exhausted yet alive. This, she whispered, is where it begins. She saved one last file, a corporate report showing Axiom's new acquisitions. Her eyes paused on one small line. Pending acquisition Turner. Associates. Daniel's company. Her lips parted slightly. The faintest smile touched her face. The babies stirred again, their soft cries filling the silence. Grace rose, her expression calm, her movements sure. Outside, the storm clouds were fading, but inside her apartment, something else had started, a different kind of storm, slow and silent. And as she whispered good morning to her children, the printer hummed again, spitting out one last sheet, the company's next merger list. At the very bottom, a single note read, "Transition of ownership expected within 12 months." Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. The light from the screen glinted against her face like a spark catching fire. And in that small, quiet moment, the first seed of revenge began to grow. The city lights glittered beneath her window like scattered diamonds. But Grace wasn't looking at the skyline, she was looking at the future she was building from its ashes. Her fingers moved fast over the passer's keyboard, the sound sharp, confident. The screen glowed with legal forms, corporate registration documents, and filings stamped with her new name, Eden Holdings, LLC. Her pulse thudded as she typed in the final detail. Founder Grace E. Turner. A year had passed since the hospital. A year since Daniel's betrayal had crushed her. But that same year had reshaped her into someone he would no longer recognize. She now stood in a small rented office high above the city white walls. Clean desk and 3 framed baby photos lying neatly beside a single folder labeled Ownership Transfer, Axiom Equity Allocation. Grace glanced at the pictures, smiling faintly. Her triplets, her quiet reason for surviving every sleepless night. They had grown strong, just like her. But this time, her strength wasn't built from love. It was built from focus. It had started slowly. One class, one book, one small step each night after she put the babies to bed. She had enrolled in an online broke course in corporate law and forensic accounting, studying with headphones on while bottles and baby monitors surrounded her. Her mentor, Dr. Evelyn Hart, a retired financial lawyer in her 60s, had been her first guide. Evelyn had spotted her brilliance immediately. "You have an instinct for numbers," Evelyn had told her. "But instincts mean nothing without structure. Learn the system, then use it." Grace did. She learned every clause, every loophole, every silence the law allowed her to use as a weapon. Now that knowledge was being forged into something real. She clicked Submit on her registration form. A small confirmation message blinked on her screen. Eden Holdings successfully incorporated. A quiet satisfaction filled her chest. Not joy, not revenge, just balance, returning to a world that had once spun out of control. Grace reached for the folder and flipped through her Axiom stock records. Her deferred shares had finally been converted. The value was staggering. The holdings placed her as the third largest shareholder in a major conglomerate now preparing to acquire new companies. Her eyes stopped at one name buried in the acquisition list: Turner and Associates, Daniel's firm. For a moment her hand froze above the page. Then a slow, measured smile touched her lips. "You left me with nothing," she whispered, her voice calm, deliberate. "I built everything in silence." She placed the folder beside the photos of her children, 4 symbols of creation, 3 lives born from love, 1 empire born from betrayal. The office was quiet except for the ticking of a small desk clock. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the skyline gold. The world outside had no idea that a storm was quietly forming behind that calm face. Grace closed her laptop, straightened her posture, and looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back wasn't the same one Daniel had left. Her eyes were steady, her face serene, her silence sharpened into strategy. She picked up her pen and circled the date of the next Axiom board meeting. Her time had come. In the faint hum of the morning city, a single phone notification appeared on her screen. Breaking news. Axiom Group to acquire Turner and Associates. Official announcement expected soon. Grace didn't blink. She only whispered to herself, "Perfect timing." Outside, the sunlight flooded the glass towers. Inside, Grace's quiet revenge had just been born, and like the dawn itself, it was unstoppable. Somewhere far below, in another building, Daniel Turner's phone buzzed with the same news, and for the first time since he left her, their names were once again on the same page. The sound of glass shattering ripped through the mansion. Daniel slammed his whiskey tumbler against the wall, shards glittering under the morning light that poured through the wide windows of their expensive home. The front page newspaper lay crumpled on the marble floor, headlines screaming in bold black letters. Turner and Associates under financial scrutiny, major clients pull out amid audit rumors. Lila rushed into the room, silk robe dragging against the floor, her expression both annoyed and alarmed. "Daniel, what is going on? You're scaring the staff." He paced back and forth, jaw tight. "The press got hold of our internal numbers. Someone leaked them. Investors are pulling out and the board is panicking." Lila picked up the newspaper and scanned the article. "It says the delays are linked to merger filings with Axiom Group." She looked up sharply. "Didn't you tell me that was all handled?" Daniel stopped. The mention of Axiom sent a chill through him. "It was," he said quickly, rubbing his temples. "At least it should have been." Lila folded her arms. "You need to get ahead of this. Hire a PR firm. We can spin it, say it's just the economy." Her calm tone irritated him. "It's not the economy. Lila, something's wrong. Someone is targeting me." The tension thickened. The house, large, elegant, soulless, felt colder than usual. Even the expensive chandelier above them seemed to swing slightly, as if listening. Daniel stormed into his home office, papers scattered across his desk. The computer screen was filled with urgent emails. He clicked one marked urgent. Legal Compliance Request Section 12B. The sender's name froze him. Eden Holdings Legal Department on behalf of Axiom Group Integration Review. The message was short, clinical. "Dear Mr. Turner, as part of Axiom's acquisition process, please provide full documentation of all outstanding financial activities within 48 hours, as required under Section 12B of the Merger Integration Policy. Respectfully, Grace E. Turner, Managing Director, Eden Holdings. His hands trembled as he reread it. The name hit like lightning. Grace, he whispered. Lila, standing behind him, leaned closer. Grace Turner? Your ex-wife? He turned slowly toward her, face pale. It can't be. She doesn't have that kind of power. But even as he said it, the words felt hollow. Grace had always been smarter than he gave her credit for. Lila frowned, trying to stay composed. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Someone else with the same name. Daniel's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. No, she's behind this. She's coming for me. He sank into his chair, staring blankly at the glowing screen. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the tall windows like silent judgment. Lila placed a hand on his shoulder, part comfort, part fear. Then stop her before she ruins everything. He looked up at her, anger and panic mixing in his eyes. You don't stop Grace once she starts something. You just wait and hope she gets tired, Lila scoffed. She's a single mother with 3 kids. How dangerous can she be? Daniel didn't answer. The image of Grace's quiet determination, her calm eyes, her silence that once unnerved him flashed in his mind. He had seen that look before, years ago, when she made impossible things happen through sheer will. His phone buzzed. Another email. This one from an investor he'd known for years. Daniel, we're freezing all pending contracts until the Axiom audit clears. I suggest transparency. The market's talking. Daniel's grip tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. The walls of his empire, the one he'd built to prove he didn't need her, were beginning to crack. Lila's voice broke through the silence. You're overthinking this. Just handle it like you always do. Talk your way out. He turned to her slowly, his tone colder than the rain outside. This isn't talk, Lila. This is war. The camera of life lingered on the glowing laptop screen, Grace's name shining in the center of the email, bold and unflinching. Somewhere across the city, she was watching her plan unfold piece by piece. And as Daniel stared at the rain-streaked window, the faint reflection of his own fear stared back quiet, pale, and growing. In that reflection, a whisper of dread formed, the kind that comes when you realize your past has finally caught up. Because soon, it wouldn't just be rumors, it would be exposure. The sound of cameras clicking filled the air like a sudden storm. Flashes went off in every direction, bouncing off the marble floors and glass walls of the Axiom headquarters. The tension was heavy, electric, every eye in the massive boardroom locked on one door. It opened slowly. Grace Turner walked in. Her presence silenced the room. Dressed in a sleek black suit, hair pulled neatly into a bun, and calm eyes that saw everything, she didn't need to raise her voice. The sound of her heels striking the polished floor was enough. The executives whispered among themselves. The press at the back raised their cameras higher. At the far end of the long table sat Daniel Turner, confident on the outside, but pale beneath his mask. He'd received the summons for this integration meeting 2 days ago, not knowing who would be attending. Now, as Grace stepped into the light, his breath caught. He hadn't seen her in over a year. She looked nothing like the woman he left crying in that apartment. Gone was the softness. What replaced it was quiet power. Grace placed a folder on the table, straightened her jacket, and spoke in a tone both steady and unshakable. Effective today, she said, her voice echoing through the boardroom. Eden Holdings has finalized its acquisition of Turner and Associates. I'll be assuming interim control. Gasps broke the silence. The flash of cameras intensified. Daniel rose from his seat. What are you talking about? His voice cracked slightly, the room amplifying every word. You can't just walk in here and... Grace turned her gaze toward him, calm but piercing. Can. And I did. She opened the folder and slid a stack of documents across the table. Here are the merger filings, legal authorizations, and ownership confirmations. All verified by the SEC and Axiom Group. Your firm now falls under my management structure. Daniel's hand trembled as he picked up the papers. Every line confirmed the truth. His company, his pride, now belonged to her. The CEO of Axiom cleared his throat. Miss Turner, we didn't realize Eden Holdings was you. Grace gave a polite smile. That was intentional. The boardroom murmured again, the realization spreading like wildfire. Daniel swallowed hard. Grace, you planned this? Her eyes locked on his. No, Daniel. You did. She reached for a remote and clicked the projector. The screen behind her came to life, a timeline of bank transfers, emails, and corporate expense reports. Let's review your company's financial conduct during your leadership, she said evenly. Slide after slide revealed payments to luxury accounts, hotel stays, and private gifts, all traced to Daniel's use of corporate funds during his relationship with Lila. The audience's whispers turned to audible gasps. Journalists scribbled notes, executives exchanged uneasy looks. Grace's voice stayed calm. As you can see, these funds were drawn from company accounts originally financed through Axiom's seed investment, meaning, technically, through me. She paused. You used my work to fund your affair. Daniel's face drained of color. Grace, stop this. We can talk privately. She cut him off gently, almost pitying. No. You taught me that some conversations need witnesses. The CEO leaned forward, uneasy. Miss Turner, these findings, they imply serious ethical violations. Grace nodded. They do. Which is why, as interim controller, I'll be initiating a full compliance audit immediately. The room exploded with noise. Questions, murmurs, flashes. Lila, sitting near the back as PR consultant, stood abruptly. This is a setup. You can't humiliate him like this. Grace turned to her, calm and almost kind. You're right. I didn't humiliate him. He did that himself. Lila's face flushed red. Daniel looked at her, desperate, but she stepped back, realizing the cameras were capturing everything. Grace gathered her papers slowly, her movements precise, deliberate. I didn't destroy your world, Daniel, she said, her tone soft but cutting through the noise. You signed it away the day you left. Daniel sank back into his chair, breathing uneven, surrounded by flashing lights and whispers. Everything he built, the empire he left her to chase, had been handed back to her by his own ignorance. Grace turned toward the board. We'll begin restructuring tomorrow. I trust you all value transparency. No one spoke. She closed her folder, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the door. The sound of her heels echoed strong, rhythmic, final. As she reached the exit, she paused, her reflection glinting in the glass door. Some debts, she said quietly, don't need collecting. They collect themselves. And with that, she walked out. Behind her, the room erupted, executives calling lawyers, reporters rushing forward, Daniel shouting her name. But Grace didn't turn back. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing the chaos above her. Inside, she finally exhaled. She glanced down at her phone, a message notification from her lawyer, Miss Evelyn Hart. Phase 2 approved. Press statement scheduled for tomorrow morning. Grace's lips curved into a faint smile. Tomorrow, she whispered, they'll see the whole truth. Outside the skyscraper, thunder rumbled in the distance, low, steady, like the sound of justice arriving. And somewhere in the city below, Daniel Turner's empire continued to crumble, one silent signature at a time. The flash of cameras was blinding. Reporters shouted from every angle as Daniel Turner tried to push through the crowd, his suit wrinkled, his face pale and desperate. The once confident CEO, who had built his image on control and charm, now looked like a man drowning in his own lies. Mr. Turner, is it true you used company funds to support your affair? Mr. Turner, are you resigning voluntarily or under pressure? Where is your wife or ex-wife now? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Flashes exploded in his eyes. His bodyguard tried to block the reporters, but the damage had already been done. Every camera caught the same moment, Daniel Turner's face breaking under the weight of his own downfall. Behind him, the massive glass doors of Turner and Associates were being sealed shut. Security teams carried out boxes marked confidential documents. The headlines came fast. CEO Daniel Turner removed amid scandal. Financial misconduct. Exposed. A cautionary tale of greed. Lila Carter silent as company collapses. It was over. Hours later, the mansion that once gleamed with luxury now stood cold and quiet. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and regret. Lila Carter stood in the doorway, suitcase by her side. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were hollow. She looked at Daniel, who sat slumped on the couch, surrounded by torn newspapers and unopened letters. You promised me this wouldn't happen, she said softly, her tone more tired than angry. Daniel looked up, voice raw. You think I planned this? I lost everything. Lila gave a bitter laugh. No, Daniel. You threw everything away. He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. I didn't sign up for this kind of attention, she continued. I thought you were powerful, not reckless. Her phone buzzed another notification from a gossip site. She silenced it and picked up her bag. Where will you go? He asked, voice small. She paused at the door. Somewhere your name can't reach me. And then she was gone, her heels clicking against the marble, fading down the hallway like a closing chapter. Outside, paparazzi lights flickered again, capturing her leaving the mansion in silence. The next morning, the image was everywhere. Mistress walks out as Turner faces legal action. Across the city, in a cozy apartment filled with soft morning light, Grace sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea beside her. Her triplets, now 1-year-old, giggled on the floor, stacking colorful blocks that clattered gently on the rug. The television in the background hummed with breaking news. Following the financial scandal and public exposure, former CEO Daniel Turner has been officially removed from his position. Sources confirm all assets will be audited under new ownership. The firm is expected to restructure under Axiom Group's oversight. Grace didn't flinch. She didn't smile, either. She simply watched for a moment, then reached over and turned down the volume. The sound of her children filled the silence, instead laughter, babbling, innocence untouched by the noise of adult mistakes. She stood, walked over to them, and knelt down. One of the babies tugged at her sleeve, holding up a toy block like a trophy. Grace laughed softly, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. You know, she said gently, her voice barely above a whisper. Some storms clean more than they destroy. The babies giggled again as if agreeing, their eyes bright and full of life. Grace looked toward the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight spilled across the city skyline, the same skyline that once made her feel small. Now, it felt like hers. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her mentor, Evelyn Hart, flashed on the screen. Everything is final. His shares are dissolved. You're free, Grace. Grace read the words, then exhaled slowly. She picked up her cup of tea, her fingers steady. Freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, just peaceful. She looked down at her children again, her smile soft but strong. We made it, she whispered, quietly. The television flickered one last time, showing Daniel's image walking alone through the courthouse doors, head bowed, reporters still chasing. Grace turned the TV off. The screen went black, her reflection replacing his. For the first time, she saw herself not as a victim, but as someone whole again. She walked to the window, holding one of her children in her arms, the city glowing beneath her. The world was finally quiet. Then, in the silence, her phone buzzed once more, a new message from Axiom Group Legal Division. Your presence is requested at the upcoming press briefing to discuss future leadership roles. Grace's expression didn't change. She simply glanced at the message, set the phone down, and whispered to herself, the story isn't over yet. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly again, distant, calm, but promising that something bigger was still on its way. Rain poured over the city like a curtain of glass, heavy and relentless. The parking lot outside Axiom's corporate tower shimmered with reflections, silver puddles, blurred headlights, and the ghostly shape of a man standing alone, Daniel Turner. His suit was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. He had been standing there for nearly an hour, waiting for the one person who no longer owed him a single word. The automatic doors slid open. Grace stepped out. She wore a long beige coat, her hair pinned neatly, a black umbrella in her hand. The rain softened around her as if afraid to touch her. The air between them froze. He took a step forward, his voice trembling. Grace! She stopped, eyes steady but unreadable. Daniel. He swallowed hard, his tone desperate, shaky. I made a mistake. I know that now. I lost control of my company, of my life, of you. But we can fix this. Grace blinked once. Fix? Daniel's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry. I didn't see what I had until it was gone. I thought success would fill the emptiness, but it didn't. It destroyed me. He took another step closer. I see you everywhere now, every boardroom, every headline. You're stronger than you ever were, and it kills me that I'm not part of it." For a long moment, Grace said nothing. Only the rain spoke, tapping softly against her umbrella. Then she lowered it slightly, letting the rain hit her face. Her voice was calm, the kind that carried truth sharper than anger. "You taught me silence, Daniel," she said slowly. "You left me in it. You built your world on my quiet loyalty, thinking silence meant weakness. But I learned something." She took a step closer, her eyes holding his. "Silence isn't empty. It's where people rebuild." Daniel's lips parted, his eyes glistening. "Grace, please. I'm not asking for money or power. I just want you to forgive me. I can't live with what I did." Grace looked at him, not with hate, but with something far heavier. Understanding. "Forgiveness doesn't mean return," she said gently. "It just means I'm not carrying your guilt anymore." He tried to reach for her, but she stepped back, her hand steady. "I already did what you never could. I moved on." Her words cut deeper than anger ever could. Daniel stood there, trembling, his reflection rippling in the puddle below. The empire he lost, the woman he betrayed, the future he threw away, all mirrored back at him in broken fragments of rainwater. Grace opened her umbrella again, the quiet whoosh echoing like final punctuation. She gave him one last look, not cruel, not bitter, just final. "You taught me silence," she repeated softly. "I just used it better." Then she turned and walked away. Her reflection in the puddles shimmered with each step, calm, composed, untouchable. The camera of life lingered on Daniel's figure, shrinking behind her, blurred by rain and regret. He sank to his knees, whispering to no one, "I'm sorry." Grace didn't look back. She reached her car, opened the door, and paused for only a moment. Through the misted window, her face was still, illuminated by the city lights, not triumphant, not vengeful, just peaceful. The rain slowed, turning into a quiet drizzle. As she drove off, the windshield wipers brushed away the last traces of the storm. In the rearview mirror, Daniel grew smaller until he disappeared completely, a ghost swallowed by rain and consequence. Grace whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer. Some endings don't need applause, just silence. She drove into the night, headlights piercing through the fog. And far ahead, lightning flickered once, not as a warning, but as a quiet reminder. Even peace can carry the echo of unfinished stories. The city was alive again, bright, golden, full of sound. But this time, the noise wasn't chaos, it was harmony. Inside the tall glass tower of Eden Holdings, sunlight poured through the wide windows, warming the air with soft light. The once empty office now carried the faint sounds of laughter, three small children playing near the corner, their tiny hands stacking toy blocks on a carpet beside a desk that ruled half the skyline. Grace sat behind that desk, calm, composed, whole. Her pen glided over a document, the final approval form for a charitable foundation she was creating in her children's names. The plaque on the desk read simply, Grace E. Turner, CEO, founder. On the wall behind her hung two framed keepsakes. One, the official merger certificate from the $100 billion deal she had once unknowingly completed. The other, a family photo of her holding her triplets, smiling against the morning light. Both framed pieces told the same story. One of creation through pain, of power through patience. Her assistant, Clara, entered quietly with a cup of tea. "Morning, Miss Turner," she said warmly. "The board meeting's in 30 minutes. Grace nodded, glancing at the clock. "Thank you, Clara. And please, no interruptions for the next 10. Clara smiled and left, closing the glass door behind her. Grace leaned back in her chair and looked out across the city, the same skyline she once watched from her tiny apartment, exhausted and heartbroken. Now it watched her back with quiet respect. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, almost to herself, she began to speak softly, her voice steady, reflective, like a quiet narration carried on sunlight. "I never sought revenge," she murmured. "I sought respect." She turned her gaze to the photo of her children. "And when you respect yourself, justice follows." Her words hung in the stillness, honest and unpretentious, not the voice of a woman who won, but of one who learned. She thought of Daniel for a brief moment, not with hatred, not even sadness, just understanding. Everyone builds their empire on something. His was pride. Hers was perseverance. She opened a drawer and took out a sealed envelope marked Confidential Settlement Agreement. It was from Daniel's lawyers, the last official tie between them. Grace smiled faintly and slipped it into a box labeled Archive. It was done. She turned back toward the window, where her reflection overlapped with the skyline, a blend of the woman she used to be and the one she had become. Her triplets giggled behind her, knocking over their tower of blocks. She laughed softly, stood and knelt beside them, helping them rebuild. "See?" she whispered, aligning the first block with care. "When it falls, we just start again, but smarter." The children nodded, unaware of the depth behind their mother's words. A calm silence filled the room. No chaos, no fear, just peace. Grace looked up one last time, her eyes meeting the morning sun. The light reflected in her pupils, bright, unwavering, full of quiet promise. Her voice came again, steady and final. "The world doesn't always reward noise. Sometimes, the loudest victory is lived in silence." The camera of life slowly pulled back, her children laughing, the city glowing beyond the window, Grace standing tall between the two worlds she had built. And as the light washed over her office, the final image froze, the framed merger certificate and the family photo side by side, symbols of everything she had lost and everything she had become. Grace's story reminds us that strength isn't in fighting louder, it's in standing longer. True revenge isn't destruction, it's dignity. When you rebuild with respect, even the ruins of your past become the foundation of your power. And just before the fade out, her voice calm, proud, unwavering echoes one last time. "I didn't rise to hurt anyone. I rose because I finally remembered who I was."